Hey everyone, my name is Alex, and today I want to go through a quick tutorial basically explaining how to use the Across SDK, basically just to bridge value between different L2s, but I also really want to have a strong focus on these different actions that you can perform using the SDK on the destination chain. So the ones we're gonna focus on today are like just basically like a payments use case, doing deposits, and then also using Across to do a swap on the destination chain. So as I go through, I'll kind of explain some of the use cases I've worked with, and then also some of just fun facts on how to use the SDK in the most efficient manner. But feel free to follow up and ask any questions or if anything I didn't mention as I go through this. So I set up a very simple package or a very simple folder, and it really, I just, there's nothing really in here. I do specify some environment variables that we're going to use. I already set those in my .env file, but these are two environment variables you'll need if you're trying to reproduce this or follow along. And then my starting index file is empty, so we're really going to be starting from scratch. The most of this is coming from this README from our Across SDK. I'm going to try not to just like reproduce a lot of this, but if you are having trouble, and I'll kind of show where I'm copying and pasting some of this stuff, but this is a really good reference if you're building using the SDK. So the first thing I like to think about is just like, as we create this, like what are we going to need to collect from the user? And so this route, I think, this route object is like a really good example of like, if you're creating a front end, what are you going to need from the user to be able to get a quote and then execute a bridge plus action using Across? And this really, these 5 parameters are very important. So the origin chain ID, the destination chain ID, the input token. So this will be like, WETH on Arbitrum, and this will be WETH on Optimism. And then the input amount, which is scaled to the number of decimals. So WETH would be 18, USDC would be 6. So that's kind of where we'll start. So for every single one of these examples, we're just going to use Arbitrum as the source chain, base as the destination chain, and then we'll just set an input amount. We can do, first let's install our dependencies, So the 2 dependencies we're going to need from the beginning are the Across SDK and then also VM. Once we install those, we can then use this parse units. So that's just scaling this input amount to basically be 50 USDC, and then scaling it to 6 decimals because we're going to be using USDC for all of our examples. Well, actually, since we're going to be doing transactions, I'll just make this 15. And then I think the next step, so if you look at kind of the steps in this README, the next one is like setting up the Across client. You can just pass chains from VM. I think that's an easy way to just get started. But if you're actually building a large client or a large project, I think maybe creating like a chain object so that you can specify a lot of this information. So we can do like chain ID well, we can still import Arbitrum and base from VM. But we can use like VM chain. We don't need the RPCs. The other thing we know we're going to need is the USDC address, and that is, pulled that earlier, and then the base USDC address is there. So these are very simple chain configs, but if you were adding like, 15 different chains that like Across supports, this is probably easier to manage. So we will import this into our project, and yeah, so we have we basically have these three of the 5 parameters that I was talking about earlier. Now we have the USDC address associated with each chain. So here, the first thing I'll do, is basically we want to use our environment variables. So that's our private key, that's our RPC URL. The RPC URL is going to be the RPC from the origin chain. So I think that's a really important thing to note, is just that the source chain is where you're going to actually be executing the deposit and all the transactions. Nothing actually needs to be executed on the destination chain, because you have relayers that are essentially going to be executing these transactions on base on behalf of the user. So yeah, we'll include, I already included the RPC for Arbitrum as an environment variable. So now we'll just, let's build this. Well, let's actually create the cross client, and then we'll build the route first. So let's create like a source chain config. Yeah, we'll just create one for our destination chain. Perfect. So that's basically just, this is going to contain the VM chain, the chain ID, and then the USDC address, which will make it easier based on these constants we set up here. And now let's create our Across client. Create Across client. So this is where we will kind of use this README. So we have this create Across client that we can import from the SDK. And so the 2 parameters that they want is this integrator ID. This is what Across uses to basically track different transactions made by different integrations. So if there is some type of issue, if you're maybe setting your fees wrong, or transactions are failing that you're adding on the destination chain, we can easily see that with a lot of the data we're collecting, and we're able to call it out and fix it quickly. So that's the main point of the integrator ID. And then these chains, these are just those VM chains we're just going to, that we want to support. So for this demo, it's integrator ID, and we'll just use the default. And then for the chains, it's just going to be this, the VM chain for both Arbitrum and Base because those are the only stuff. These are the only tokens, the only chains that we're supporting with this demo. So now we have the Across client. We have basically, like all the parameters that we need to get a quote. So I'll just copy this route from the README, and what we're going to change from that is we want to use our source chain config, chain ID, and then we'll use our destination chain. So this will be Arbitrum, this will be Base, and then we want to use the USDC address from Arbitrum, and then the USDC address from Base. So perfect. We now have our route. Let's just log the route and see if we're good so far. So that looks good. We have our origin chain ID set to Arbitrum, destination to Base, input token is the USDC address on Arbitrum, and then the output is the USDC address on Base. So now we can also just get a quote. I'm going to just copy and paste this quote from the README. We'll retrieve. So this will be set to our cross client. This will be set to our input amount that we defined up here. And then our route, so these need to be, these are set to strings right now. Let's just make these addresses. So now we can get this quote and see what we return. So this is the basically the response you receive from the Across API, and this is really helpful because basically the Across SDK defines all these deposit variables that you need for doing the Across deposit. It includes this input amount and then the output amount, so it subtracts the fees automatically. Since this is just a bridge transaction from Arbitrum to Base, this is really cheap, but you really can just take these parameters and execute a bridge transaction. That's as simple as it gets. You can do, so this is just, you're going from Arbitrum to Base for 15 USDC, and you're going to receive 14.89 USDC on Base. But so that's great and all, but what we really want is to now kind of focus on these more, sophisticated use cases. And so the first one we're going to do is just like a payments use case. And so a lot of payments, it's interesting because you don't necessarily need like these cross-chain transactions on the destination chain. You can really set like your recipient as the receiver of this cross-chain transaction. But one thing that like a lot of projects that we've talked to, a big pain point is that if you're doing payments, like, and you have, a coffee or something, let's just say something is $15, you can't send 15 USDC as the input, and then this merchant or whoever is receiving the payment is going to receive 14.89 USDC. Like, so you need to be able to define the output amount, and then basically add that fee to the user amount. So one way that we've done this in the past is basically so what we can do is basically create a function that takes in the input amount, and then we also, so when we look at the response from the get quote function, we can see that we have all these fees as amounts, and then we also have them as percentages. So what we can do is we can use the input amount that we want to get to, and then the percentage to basically scale that amount based on this relay. So what we're using is this total relay fee percentage, and we're scaling that amount so that it reflects the amount that we actually want to receive on the destination chain. So how we'll do this is, so we need to first get this quote response, and now we'll get the adjusted input amount, and it'll be based on the input amount, and then the quote dot fees total relay fee as a percent. So that will give us, yes, what we want as the input amount. And then we can use as the output amount the actual amount that the user applied as the input amount. So let's create these deposit. We're gonna modify so these quote params are actually, the deposit object is actually what's passed to when we go to execute the quote. So we just want to, we basically want to take all of the deposit parameters, but except we want to update the input amount to be the adjusted input amount, and then the output amount, we're going to set it as the input amount. So let's log this and see. So now we can see, yes, our output amount is 15 USDC, and our input amount is 15.09 cents. So yeah, why this is cool is, I mean, now the user is paying that little bit of a fee, and then you're receiving the full amount on the destination chain. So before we get into other use cases, let's go back to our README, and we're going to add this section, which is actually used to execute the quote. So yes, so this will be our Across client. So we still need to create our wallet client. So we're going to quickly create a VM file where we include all of our VM functions. And we're going to create one just like create user wallet client. So what we're going to need is the private key. This should be as, we'll add it for a string for a second. We need the chain. From VM. We are also going to need the RPC URL. So we're going to use the function from VM, private key to account from VM accounts. Oh yeah, I think this needs to be set. Okay, so now we have the account and our wallet client, create wallet client. Yeah, account, chain. So that all looks good. Okay, so this function will create a VM wallet client for us that we can then pass and import that. And we just need to create this wallet client. That all looks good. Let's look at our private key. Okay, so now we should be good. So what we're doing is we're passing this wallet client that's going to be used to execute the transaction on Arbitrum that is then going to bridge funds. Everything is going to basically follow these deposit parameters we created. We are going to actually use these deposit parameters that we updated because we want to adjust the input amount and the output amount. And then, yeah, this is just like a nice function that allows you to easily track the transactions. It recognizes if there needs to be an approval. So it makes it really easy to, check the status of these transactions on these different chains. One quick function I'm just going to add that I use a lot is this basically creating this transaction URL. So this makes it much more readable once we receive. Yeah, so we have this this transaction receipt. Let's see if we can use this. Now this will be transaction receipt, transaction hash. So we're basically just going to create these to inform deposited USDC, and this is the chain. That looks good. And then this is the tracking the approval if one is needed. This is tracking the deposit, and then this down here is tracking the fill on the destination chain. So we actually want to provide the destination config for USDC. So that all looks good. And then we also have this action success Boolean, which is cool. It'll recognize the transactions. So if we're doing like a deposit or something on after the bridge transaction on the destination chain, it will notify you if the transaction was successful or not. Yeah, that's a good. Let's just take this part out. So this is, I think we're in good shape. So now we have here's the deposit ID. Yeah, we don't need it. But here, so what we have right now is, kind of summing it all up. We have basically the information we collect from the user on where they want to bridge funds and the amount. We created our Across client, the route. We then got a quote from the API, or basically calling to get the suggested fees from the API. We adjusted our input and output amount based on this payment use case that we're going through. We modified some of the parameters so that we could exactly define that output amount, and we created the wallet client that's going to execute the transaction, and then we set up the whole function that's going to be executing it. So let's just run this. We have, we're using 15 USDC. So now we can see our deposit on Arbitrum. So I kind of expected that. Sometimes I was doing some transactions before this, and I think I'm getting rate limited by our standard RPC. But we can go in here. So this is the deposit we made, so we can see the output amount is 15 USDC. The input amount is a little over 15 USDC. And now we can go over to base. And 32 seconds ago, we can see we received exactly 15 USDC.